So, are nations just like billiard balls, crashing into each other in a constant fight for power? Or are they all tangled up in a giant, sticky cobweb of connections? Today, we're breaking down two huge theories that try to explain, everything. Why countries go to war, why they sometimes work together, and how our world of globalization really operates. To really get a grip on global politics, you've got to start with this one fundamental question. How do you even see the world? I mean, is it basically just a collection of individual states, each one out for itself in a high-stakes game of survival? Or is it something way more complex, like a vast interconnected system where pretty much everyone is linked to everyone else?
All right, here's how we're going to tackle this. We'll explore those two powerful metaphors for how the world works. We'll look at a major challenge to the whole system, and then we'll ask what all of this means for the future of, well, all of us.
Okay, let's dive right in. We're going to introduce our two main models for making sense of international relations. You can think of them as two totally different pairs of glasses for looking at the very same, very complex world.
So on one hand, you've got the billiard ball model. The idea here is that nations are these hard, self-contained units just bouncing off each other in a never-ending struggle for power and security. It's a world built on competition. But on the other hand, you've got the cobweb model. This one sees a world of tangled connections, where things like trade, ideas, and organizations create this massive web of overlapping relationships that actually changes how nations act. That's a world built on interdependence.
First up, let's rack the table and take a look at the world as a game of billiards. This is the core idea behind a huge school of thought in international relations known as realism. And the starting point for realism is this really powerful and often misunderstood concept: anarchy. Now, this doesn't mean chaos in the streets. No, in international relations, it means there's no global 911. There is no world government, no central authority that nations can call up for protection if things go wrong. And this idea, it has some seriously deep roots. The ancient Indian philosopher Kautilya put it pretty bluntly: it's a world where the strong dominate. Centuries later, guys like Machiavelli and Hobbes would basically say the same thing. Their argument is simple. If there's no one around to enforce the rules, then power is the only thing that truly guarantees your safety.
So if you're a country in this anarchic world, your playbook is actually pretty straightforward. First, your number one goal, above all else, is survival. Second, to survive, you need power, military power, economic power, you name it. And third, because of that whole anarchy thing, you are on your own. This is the principle of self-help. You simply can't depend on anyone else to save you.
So the bottom line here is this. In the billiard ball model, the only players that truly matter are the states themselves. International politics just becomes this giant continuous game of balancing power. If one country gets too strong, others will team up to balance against it. Not because they're friends, but out of pure, cold self-interest.
But is that the whole story? What if those billiard balls are actually all stuck together in some kind of massive sticky web? Well, that brings us to the cobweb model, which is the central idea of a competing theory, liberalism.
Now, this image here completely flips the script. This is John Burton's cobweb model. And instead of separate, distinct states, we see this incredibly complex network, where governments, international organizations like the UN, and even entire societies are all tangled up together. Yeah, states are still important, but they're just one single node in a much, much larger network.
So who's weaving this web? Well, it's a whole bunch of what we call transnational actors. We're talking about giant multinational corporations like Apple, influential NGOs like the Red Cross, and yeah, even terrorist networks and global social movements. All of these groups operate across borders, creating connections and conflicts that states can't always control.
And this just perfectly illustrates the core difference between the two worldviews. For realists, the world is defined by states in conflict, all managed through a delicate balance of power. But for liberals, the world is defined by all sorts of actors linked together through interdependence, where cooperation is actually possible through shared institutions and this idea of collective security, the principle that an attack on one is an attack on all.
Okay, so the liberal idea of an interconnected web, it sounds pretty optimistic, right? But it begs a really serious question. Is this web woven fairly? Is everyone equally connected, or are some folks caught in the web while others are the spiders?
This is where dependency theory comes in with a really sharp critique. It argues that the global cobweb, globalization itself, isn't a network of equals at all. Instead, as this diagram shows, it's a hierarchy. You have a wealthy, powerful core of developed nations at the center. They buy cheap raw materials from the poorer periphery countries on the outside. Then, the core manufactures high-value goods and sells them back at a huge profit, which actively keeps the periphery in a state of economic dependence by sucking out its resources and labor.
As Professor Ramesh Thakur puts it, this form of globalization, this web, it hasn't created prosperity for everyone. In fact, for many, it has just deepened poverty and inequality. The connections are there, sure, but they're structured to benefit the few at the expense of the many.
I mean, a perfect everyday example of this theory in action is the journey of something like an iPhone. It's the poster child for modern globalization. All the high-value stuff, the design, the branding, the massive profits, that's all captured in the core, mainly the USA. But the low-value, labor-intensive assembly, that happens in the periphery, in places like China. And even the tax strategies route profits through other core countries. Critics argue the system is designed from the ground up to keep value flowing from the periphery to the core.
So, we've got these competing theories, a world of clashing states, a world of interconnected webs, and a world of systematic exploitation. How on earth are we supposed to make sense of the planet today?
Well, the source material offers this brilliant modern metaphor for today's globalization. Think of the world not as a billiard table or a cobweb, but as a multiplex cinema. In one theater, you've got a realist movie playing, full of power politics and state competition. Right next door, there's a liberal film all about global cooperation. And then down the hall, a critical theory documentary is exposing the deep inequalities of the system. The thing is, they're all playing at the exact same time.
So the big takeaway here is that no single theory has all the answers. The realist lens helps us understand conflict. The liberal lens helps explain cooperation. And critical theories force us to ask about fairness, who wins and who loses. To really get a complete picture of our complicated world, you have to be able to switch between all of them.
And that leaves us with one final and pretty provocative thought. As we face these enormous global challenges that no single nation can solve alone, I'm talking about pandemics, climate change, which model is going to win out? Will the deep interdependence of our global cobweb force us to work together? Or will the immense pressures of survival make nations pull back, harden their shells, and start treating the world like a game of billiards once more? The answer to that? Well, it's going to define our future.